Nella noticed the child because of the sound. Not crying, exactly. More like the noise a kettle makes before it starts to scream, a held pressure, a trembling edge. She heard it beneath the noise of the lower bazaar in Ashenvale, beneath the shouting of fish sellers and the clatter of coin on stone, and she looked up from her herb stall before she decided to. A small dragon sat in the dirt between two market stalls, not a hatchling, old enough to have proper scales, pale grey with faint streaks of gold that hadn't hardened yet, old enough to know that crying in public was a thing that would be noticed. He was trying very hard not to do it. His shoulders shook anyway. Nobody stopped. The other humans in the market glanced and moved on, because you did not approach a dragon child uninvited. It was not a written law. It was the kind of understanding that got passed down through families the way you passed down a good coat, quietly, because it had kept someone alive. The dragon overseers at the bazaar gate watched the child without moving, not their concern. Nella stood behind her stall for 30 seconds. She counted them. She had gotten good at counting seconds since her husband Pell died, since the house got quieter than she knew a house could get. Then she came out from behind the stall. Her daughter Dara, who was 17 and far too smart to stop worrying about her mother, said "ma'am" in the tone that meant don't. Nella was already across the lane. She crouched down in front of the child, low enough to be at his eye level. His eyes were amber, wet, and startled. He had not expected anyone to stop. That was clear from his face. She said simply, "Are you lost?" He stared at her, a human crouching in the dirt to speak to him. He looked around, as though checking if someone had sent her, as though this required an explanation. "My escort was supposed to meet me at the east gate," he said. "I cannot find it. I have been looking for quite a long time." He said it with the careful composure of a child who had practiced sounding calm. His voice still broke at the edges. Nella looked at him, then she sat down properly in the dirt beside him, not crouching, sat. She heard the ripple go through the nearby stalls, the held breath, the whispered alarm. She ignored it. "My name is Nella," she said. "What's yours?" He blinked. "Saurin." "All right, Saurin. The east gate is past the cloth quarter, which is hard to find if you don't know the market. We'll figure it out." She paused. "You can keep crying if you need to. I'm not going anywhere." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he did cry, properly. Not loudly, but properly, the way children do when someone gives them permission. His small-scaled shoulders shook, and he pressed both hands to his face, and Nella put her arm around him and let him. She did not ask if she could touch him. She did ask. He had said yes, quietly, before the question was quite finished. They sat in the dirt together for nearly 20 minutes. She told him about the market, which stalls had the best bread, which spice merchant cheated on weights. He listened. By the time he had stopped shaking, he knew more about the Ashenvale Bazaar than most people who worked in it. When the palace soldiers came, they came fast. 6 of them, in black and gold scale plate, landing badly enough to scatter a canvas awning. Their relief at seeing Saurin was enormous. Their horror at seeing him sitting in the dirt beside a human woman was also enormous. Nella stood, brushed dust from her skirt, and nodded to the child. "East gate's to the left of the big wool stall," she said. "You'll see it." He looked at her. Something in his face was very still, the way a room goes still after a door closes. "Thank you," he said. He said it like he meant it as 2 separate words. She went back to her stall. Dara grabbed her arm the moment she was behind the counter. "Do you know whose child that is?" "No," Nella said, and started counting the morning's coin. "Ma'am, those were palace soldiers." Nella looked up. She looked at the soldiers escorting Saurin away through the market crowd. She looked at the insignia on their armor, which she didn't recognize. She looked at Dara's face, which was the specific color of someone trying not to be sick. "Well," she said. "Well," Dara repeated. "That's all you have to say." Nella set the coin down. She thought about the child's shaking shoulders. She thought about the way he had looked at her when she sat down, like he was checking if it was a trick. She thought about Pell, who had died of a fever while their district's physician was relocated to serve a dragon lord's estate 40 miles north. She thought about 30 seconds and how she had counted them and how she'd run out before she could talk herself out of moving. I would do it again, she said, not defiantly, just as a fact, the way you stated something that had already been decided. Dara stared at her for a long moment. Then she picked up the coin, counting where her mother had left off, because someone had to, and because she had known her whole life that her mother was going to get them both killed one day, and there was very little she could do about it. 3 days later, Nella was refilling her herb jars when the palace guard arrived at her stall. Not the market overseers, not the district patrol, palace guard, the kind whose armor had no dents and whose faces had no expression. There were 4 of them. They didn't need 4 of them. That was a statement. You are Nella of the lower bazaar, the lead guard said. It was not a question. Yes, she said. You are requested at the cresthold. You have 1 hour to settle your affairs. She didn't argue. She had learned a long time ago that arguing with certain kinds of sentences was like arguing with weather. She told Dara to mind the stall. Dara grabbed her wrist before she could turn away. I'll go to Hess, Dara said low, as soon as you're through the gate. Nella knew who Hess was. She had always pretended not to, for both their sakes. She looked at her daughter's face, the set jaw, the 2 steady eyes, and felt something loosen in her chest. Don't do anything that gets you arrested, she said. I mean it, Dara. I'll just talk to him. That's what worries me. She let the guards take her. The cresthold was built into the living rock of the Orath Peaks. People said it had been growing for over 900 years, 1 new hall added each century, each one larger than the last, as though the emperor was trying to build something that could hold his age. Walking into it felt like walking into a mountain that had decided to become a palace. Every ceiling was too high. Every door was built at a scale that made a person feel like they had shrunk. She was put in an antechamber and left. She waited 6 hours. She was given water once, no food, no explanation. She sat on a stone bench that had been designed for a creature 4 times her size and tried not to feel like a parcel. She mostly thought about Pell. She did this when she was frightened, not because it helped, but because it was honest. He had been a good man who died of something easily treated, and the reason it went untreated was a decree signed in this very building by the creature she was presumably about to meet. She thought about that, and she thought about Saurin shaking in the market dust, and she thought, well, you cannot choose which things move you. When the guards came back for her, she followed them through 3 more corridors and into a room that was the size of a field. Emperor Vale was at the far end. He was 900 years old and looked like the idea of age, like something that had been weathering for so long that it had become the weather. His scales were the color of old iron. He sat on a raised platform, and the room arranged itself around him the way rivers arrange themselves around stone. He studied her, not with contempt, which she had prepared for, with something closer to curiosity, like she was a geological feature he had not previously catalogued. He did not speak first. She waited. She had learned this too, that silence was not hers to fill. Why did you stop? He said finally. Because no one else had, she said. Did you know who he was? No. What would you have done if you had known? She thought about it, a real think, not the kind designed to produce a safe answer. The same thing probably, she said. The room, which had 6 advisors and 2 guards in it who she had barely noticed, went very quiet. Vale looked at her for a long time. She held the look, not bravely, exactly. She just didn't have the energy to look away from something true. You will remain in the cresthold, he said. 7 days, as a guest. I wish to speak with you again. She had not expected that. She hadn't expected punishment exactly either. But she had expected something more decisive than 7 days. May I send word to my daughter? She asked. He looked at her, a long pause, the kind of pause that in a human face would mean recalibrating. Yes, he said. She nodded. She turned to follow the guards out. Behind her, in a gallery she hadn't noticed above the throne room, Iath, the emperor's eldest daughter, and first heir to everything in Varun, watched her father watch the human woman's back. She had served beside him for 4 centuries. In 4 centuries, he had never said yes to a request he wasn't asked for. She wrote that down in the part of her mind where she kept things that mattered. In the city, Dara was already in the tannery district. She had found Commander Hess behind 3 locked doors and a man who pretended to be deaf. She told him everything, fast and flat, the way her mother talked when she was keeping her voice steady on purpose. Hess listened without moving. He was a former soldier with a careful 15-year record of not getting anyone killed. He asked 2 questions, then he sat down and said nothing for a while. "What do we do?" Dara asked. He said, "We wait, and we stay out of the way, and we hope she is smarter in there than she has been out here." Dara said, "She's plenty smart. She just doesn't care about the same things you and I care about." Hess looked at her. He didn't have an answer to that. He was finding lately that the things he didn't have answers to were becoming a longer list. Saurin found her on the 2nd day. She was in the corridor outside her assigned quarters, trying to find a window that looked toward the lower city. She hadn't found one. The Cresthold's windows faced mostly inward, toward other parts of itself. He came around a corner the way children arrive, like he hadn't quite decided to until he already had. "Hello," he said. He was in formal court clothes now, grey and gold. He stood straighter than he had in the market. He was trying very hard to seem like someone who had not spent 20 minutes crying in the dirt 3 days ago. "Hello, Saurin," she said. Something in his face eased at the name, just slightly, like a door unsticking. "I wanted to thank you again," he said, more properly. "In the market I was," he paused, "not at my best." "Neither am I when I'm lost," she said. "It's allowed." He looked at her. He seemed to be searching for the hidden layer of what she'd said, the political angle, the courtesy construction. He didn't find one. His expression moved through confusion and landed somewhere near relief. "Have you eaten?" she asked. He hadn't. He had missed the morning meal looking for her through 2 of the palace's east wings. She found that a kitchen worker would give her almost anything she asked for, because no one was certain what category she was in, and no one wanted to be the one who underfed her. She got bread, hard cheese, and a clay pot of something warm and spiced that Saurin said was called Herath broth. They sat in the corridor and ate, not at a table, on the floor. He gave her a single uncertain look when she sat down against the wall, and then he sat beside her, and the look went away. Over the next 4 days he found her every morning. She didn't plan for it, but she stopped being surprised by it. He told her about his lessons, imperial history, military formations, the lineages of the great dragon houses. He told her these things the way someone describes a task they are doing correctly but don't understand the purpose of. She told him about the market, about the spice merchant who cheated on weights and thought no one knew. About Dara, who was furious about everything important and somehow made even anger feel like a kind of care. He asked about her husband once. She told him about Pell, not the anger part, not yet, just the fact of him, the way he laughed, the specific knock he had on the door when he came home. Saurin listened and didn't say he was sorry. He just nodded like he was memorizing something. On the 4th day, he asked her why she hadn't been afraid of him in the market. She thought about it. "I was," she said, "a little, but you were sadder than I was afraid so." He turned that over for a moment. "That doesn't seem like a very good system," he said. "It isn't," she agreed, "but it's mine." He almost smiled. He was not a child who smiled easily. When he came close to it, it looked like he was deciding whether to trust the feeling. The trouble came on the 5th day. Vale summoned her again, but the room was different this time. Iath was present. 6 senior advisors sat along the left wall. 2 military commanders stood at the back. Nobody called it a formal hearing. It was absolutely a formal hearing. Vale asked about humans, not her humans, what they wanted, what they thought, how they spoke about the Empire in private. She answered straight. She told him that mostly people wanted to keep the things that kept them alive. Physicians, teachers, the ability to bury someone close to home. She said that 3 years ago, her district's physician was relocated by imperial decree to serve a dragon lord's estate, and her husband died of a fever that any physician would have caught in an afternoon. The room went quiet, not the polite quiet, the kind where everyone stops moving. Vale said, "You hold me responsible for that." She said, "You signed the decree. I don't think you're cruel. I think you didn't consider that anyone in my district would need a physician that month. There's a difference, but from where I was standing, Pell still died." One of the advisors started to speak. Vale raised one hand without looking at him, and the man stopped. Vale looked at her. "You speak to me as though I am a person who can be reasoned with," he said. "Aren't you?" she said. He looked at her for a very long time. She didn't fill the silence. She had run out of fear somewhere around the second day, not because the situation had become safer, just because she had used it all up. He ended the audience without punishing her, without responding, almost, just a slow inclination of his head that the guards clearly understood because they moved to escort her out. As she passed the gallery above the throne room, she didn't look up. But Iath, watching from it, watched her go with an expression that had taken her 4 centuries to learn to hide, and was failing to hide it now. The expression was respect. She would do something about that later. For now she let herself feel it, which was its own kind of admission. On the 6th morning, palace staff told Nella, as though mentioning the weather, that 3 members of a human sedition group had been arrested in the lower city overnight. She stood in the corridor outside her quarters and kept her face still while she thought about Dara, about Hess, about who in the cell might have been taken and whether her daughter had been nearby when it happened. She did not know. She was 600 feet above the city inside a mountain palace, and she did not know. She asked to send another message to her daughter. She was told that outgoing messages required approval from the palace steward, who was not available until midday. She asked for an audience with the emperor. She was told the emperor's schedule was not accessible to guests without prior arrangement. She stood in the corridor for 2 minutes, then she went and knocked on Saurin's door. He opened it immediately, which meant he had probably been awake for a while. His formal clothes were on, but his face was still soft from sleep. He looked at her face and said, "What happened?" She told him all of it: Dara, Hess, the cell, the arrests. She told him not because she expected a 9-year-old to fix it, but because she needed one person in this building to know the full thing. He listened without interrupting, which was a skill most adults didn't have. When she finished, he said, "I can't order a release. I don't have that. I'm the 3rd heir and my word only matters in the training rooms." "I know," she said. "Then why did you tell me?" She said, "Because I needed someone to sit with me while I figure out what to do next. You did that for me in the market. I thought I'd return it." He sat down on the floor of his doorway. After a moment, she sat across from him. They stayed like that in silence, which was different from the silence the palace usually produced. That silence was the silence of a place that had never needed to be afraid of anything. This was the silence of 2 people holding something heavy together. "Is your daughter like you?" he asked. "Worse," Nella said. "She actually thinks before she does things, then she does them anyway." He almost smiled again. Then Iath appeared at the far end of the corridor. She was in full court dress, and she moved the way powerful things move, not fast, not slow. Just with the complete certainty that the space would arrange itself for her. She told Saurin he had a training session. He stood up, looked at Nella, then at his sister. "She's worried about her daughter," he said. Iath looked at Nella. Nella looked back. "Go to your session," Iath said. He went. He looked back once. Nella raised 2 fingers, not a wave, just acknowledgement, and he turned the corner. Iath sat down in the chair at the end of the corridor, not across from Nella on the floor. In the chair, the way she occupied every room, she pulled it slightly closer. "The 3 people arrested," she said, "were they from a group your daughter was connected to?" Nella said nothing. "I'm not asking to build a case," Iath said. I'm asking because I need to know how frightened you are, and how frightened you are will change what I tell you. Nella looked at her for a moment. I don't know if Dara was near it, she said. That's the worst part, I don't know. Iath nodded. The arrested three will go before a magistrate in 2 days. Standard charge is forced relocation to the northern settlements. Nella said nothing. Relocation meant a minimum of 3 years. Relocation meant that at least one of those people had family who would wait 3 years and then get a letter. I am telling you this, Iath said, because my father is considering something, and I would like to know if you understand it before he announces it so that I can understand you better. What is he considering? A decree, small, administrative. It would require that human settlements above a certain size retain minimum allocations of essential workers. Physicians, educators, a few others. Workers could not be relocated without formal petition to an imperial court. Nella sat with that for a moment. She thought about Pell, about the physician's empty office, about the 4 families on her street who had also used that physician in the last decade and had also, in those 4 families, one death that didn't need to happen. Will it be enough? Iath asked. Not for the ones who have already lost someone, Nella said, but for the people who haven't lost someone yet, yes, it's enough to matter. Iath looked at her steadily. You aren't going to ask me to push him toward it. I have no right to ask you anything, Nella said. I'm a herb seller from the lower market. Yes, Iath said, and somehow that is exactly why he's considering it. She stood, she straightened her sleeves, which didn't need straightening. She said at the door, my brother ate breakfast every morning you were here. He has not eaten breakfast voluntarily in 4 years. She didn't wait for a response. She walked away down the corridor, her footsteps making no sound on stone that should have echoed. Nella sat in the corridor for a long time after that. She thought about the weight of small things, about how a person could spend their whole life being the right size for enormous rooms and still not know how to sit in the dirt beside someone who was hurting. She thought about Saurin's face when she sat down next to him in the market, the way he'd looked at her like he was checking for the trick. She hoped wherever Dara was, she was doing something practical. She hoped she was safe. She hoped she was eating. Dara had not been arrested. She had been 3 stalls away when Rovan, 19, newer to the cell than anyone should be at 19, panicked at a patrol stop and ran. She watched him run. She watched the soldiers give chase. She stayed exactly where she was, hands on a bolt of fabric she had no intention of buying, and did not run, and did not look, and did not do the 17 things she wanted to do. Hess had told her once, the hardest skill is knowing which moment is not yours to fix. She had hated that lesson. She was starting to understand it. She went to the tannery after dark. Hess was already there, and 2 other cell members, and nobody was speaking loudly. They had lost 3 people. Rovan, a woman named Kala who had been nearby and grabbed, and a man named Ott who had tried to pull Kala away from the soldiers and made it worse. Hess said, the situation at the Cresthold changes nothing about how we operate. Nella being there does not give us cover or protection. We stay quiet and we wait. Dara said, she's been up there 6 days and no one's told us anything except she's alive. Hess said, that's more than most people get. She slept badly. She dreamed about the East Gate, which she'd never thought about before her mother mentioned it in the note. She dreamed about sitting in the dirt, which wasn't something she'd ever particularly done, but seemed important in the dream. On the 7th morning, she opened the herb stall because someone had to. The market was quieter than usual. Word had spread about the arrests. That was how things worked in the lower bazaar, quietly, in the shape of who wasn't there. She was measuring dried root when she heard the soldiers. Different ones this time, not black and gold scale plate. Lighter armor, city guard issue. They came with a woman between them, and it took Dara 1 full second to recognize the woman was her mother because Nella looked like she had not slept in 4 days and was not going to admit it. Dara came around the stall counter. She didn't perform a reunion, neither did Nella. She walked up and Dara said, you look terrible. Nella said, the ceilings were too high. They stood next to each other for a while. Then Nella took the dried root from Dara's hand and finished measuring it. "Rovan, Kala, and Ott," Dara said low. "You heard?" "Yes." "Did you?" She stopped, started again. "Is anything going to happen?" Nella set the root down. "I don't know," she said. "Something might, something small. I don't know if small is enough." "Tell me." Nella told her about the decree. Not about the throne room, not about Saurin on the corridor floor, not about Iath in the chair. Just the decree, what it would do, who it would protect, going forward, from losing their physician to an administrative transfer. Dara listened. When Nella finished, she said, "That's a brick, not a house." Nella looked at her. "I mean it's something," Dara said, "but it's one thing. 3 people are still in a holding facility." "I know. It doesn't fix what happened to Doe." Nella's face didn't change. "I know that too." They were both quiet for a moment, and the market moved around them the way it always did, indifferent and continuous and human in all its noise. "Is it worth it?" Dara asked. Nella thought about that seriously, which was how she thought about everything. "I sat in the dirt with a child who was afraid," she said. "That was worth it on its own. Everything after is the world deciding what to do with a thing that already happened." Dara looked at her for a long moment. Then she went back to her side of the stall and started sorting the morning stock, because someone had to, because that was the job. 2 days after that, the decree came down. It was read in all human settlement forums across Varun by imperial heralds in official language that took 11 minutes to recite. What it meant, stripped of ceremony, every significant human settlement could keep its essential workers. Physicians, educators, 8 other categories, no relocation without a formal court petition. Hess read the full transcript in the tannery with the door closed. He read it twice. Then he set it on the bench and sat for a while. Dara was there. She watched him read it. She watched him sit. He said, "This is either the beginning of something real or the most expensive performance in imperial history." She said, "Probably both." He almost laughed. He didn't quite. He said, "Your mother sat in the dirt with the emperor's son and told the emperor to his face that he killed her husband. And somehow this is what he did." Dara said, "She didn't tell him to do anything. She just answered his questions." "That's what I mean," Hess said. The arrested 3, Rovan, Kala, Ott, received their sentences 2 days after the decree. The relocation order was reduced to 1 year of supervised service within the city district, not released, not absolved, but not sent north either, which meant they were coming back. Dara brought the news to her mother at the stall. Nella received it and said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "Good." Just that, good. Then she went back to serving a customer who wanted rosemary and hadn't stopped waiting just because the world had shifted slightly. Dara thought about that for the rest of the afternoon. The way her mother carried enormous things without needing them to announce themselves. The way you could change something without knowing you'd changed anything, just by being the kind of person who sits down. Weeks passed. The decree settled into the city the way real things settle, slowly, unevenly. With arguments about its edges and people who weren't sure whether to trust it yet. That was fine. Distrust was earned. Trust had to be earned back the same way. Nella opened her stall every morning. She measured root and dried herb and argued with the spice merchant over the shared wall. She sent a letter to her mother's sister in the Western District, who had not had a physician in 11 months. She cooked meals. She thought about Pell on the evenings when the house was quiet, which were most evenings, and let herself do that without apologizing for it. Dara went back to her lessons at the district school. She had a teacher who understood numbers in a way that made Dara feel like numbers were a language she had always spoken and just now found the name for. She came home with ink on her hands and talked about things Nella could only half follow, and that was right. Children were supposed to move ahead of you. Hess ran the cell, carefully, still, quietly. The decree had changed the temperature but not the structure, and the structure would need years to change if it changed at all. He stopped assuming the worst would happen on any given day. That was new. He didn't call it hope, but it was something in the same direction. In the Cresthold, Saurin asked his tutor for the human settlement records on a Tuesday morning near the end of his history lesson. The tutor was explaining the construction of the Cresthold's third eastern hall, which had been added in the Empire's 412th year. Saurin waited until the explanation finished. Then he said, "Are there records of the human settlements, their histories and names?" The tutor paused. "Such records exist in the lower archive," he said, "but they are not typically part of Heir curriculum." "I would like to read them," Saurin said. The tutor looked at him for a moment in the way adults look at children when they're not sure if the request is a phase. Then he wrote it down. He submitted the request to the archive keeper that afternoon. The archive keeper submitted it upward as required. The request arrived on Iath's desk by evening. She approved it, no comment, no attached note, just the approval mark quickly made in the particular ink she used for things she had already decided. She told her father about it the following morning during their weekly council, at the end, almost as an afterthought. He was reviewing trade figures from the coastal settlements. "Saurin requested access to the human settlement records," she said. Vale didn't look up from the figures for a moment, then he did. "Did he said. "He wants to read their histories, names of the settlements, that sort of thing." She paused. "I approved it." He looked at her, she looked back. They had been doing this for 4 centuries, the careful exchange between a father who said very little and a daughter who understood most of it. Today was different. Today she let him see that she had made the decision herself, not for his approval, and had told him after. He said, "Good." He went back to the trade figures. That evening, Vale stood at the window of his private chamber in the Cresthold's highest hall. The window faced the city. It always had. He had looked at Ashenvale from this window for 400 years without. He now understood, actually seeing it. He had seen the shape of it, the market lanes, the district borders, the wall that separated the lower bazaar from the administrative quarter. He had not seen the people in it. He thought about a woman sitting in the dirt beside his son in a market he had never walked through. He thought about the way she had answered his questions, not carefully, not with the shaped honesty of advisors, but with the blunt honesty of a person who had run out of reasons to perform. He thought about what she had said. "You don't see us. There is a difference between cruelty and blindness, but the people on the other side of it cannot tell." He had signed the physician relocation decree without looking up from his desk. He had no way to know that. He had no way to know what had been on the other side of that signature, in a district he had never visited, in a house that had gotten quieter than it should. He had not known because he had not asked. He had not asked because no one had told him. No one had told him because he was 900 years old, and who told the mountain that the river had changed course. She had told him, without anger, which would have been easier to dismiss, without begging, which would have made it political, just, "He is still dead, and you signed that decree." He did not know how to account for a human woman. He had governed humans for 9 centuries and did not know how to account for one. That was not a comfortable thing to discover about yourself at 940 years. But discomfort, he had lived long enough to know, was the only proof that something was real. He watched the city for a long time. The lights came on in the lower district as evening settled in, small lights, candles mostly, the kind of light that meant someone was home. He thought, "I have been the mountain for 900 years. I have not noticed the river." He did not know yet what that meant for the next 900. He did not know if he would live that long, or if the Empire would, or if the distance between his window and those small lights could ever be crossed in any meaningful way. What he knew was that a tired herb seller had sat in the dirt next to his son without asking permission or seeking reward, simply because the boy was alone and she was there. He had asked her what she would have done if she had known who Saurin was. The same thing, probably. 940 years, every war, every decree, every treaty and throne and conquered mountain range. And the thing that cracked something open in him was a woman who couldn't identify what she had done wrong because she hadn't done anything wrong. He stayed at the window until the small lights in the lower city began to go out, one by one, as people finished their evenings and went to sleep. He watched them go. He did not look away until the last one.